right. Looks like a few people are joining us still, so we'll wait just a moment. All right. Well, good evening. I am Hillary Anderson. I'm the Community Planning Director with the City of Coeur d'Alene. I wanted to welcome everybody to tonight's virtual Core Housing Community Meeting. I want to give you a quick meeting overview, so what to expect this evening. So obviously welcoming you to this. A little bit about the meeting purpose. This meeting is really important to hear from our community members on what's appropriate for this core housing or infill housing we'll talk to you about this evening. And so we have invited community members, neighborhood groups, we've invited realtors, we've invited builders, developers, community organizations, historic preservationists, members of our commission, city council members to come and be part of this discussion this evening. So the format is really that you'll have a presentation by staff. So that'll be led by Mike Bahari, who's associate planner with the City of Coeur d'Alene. There will be comments throughout from a few of our core housing committee members. There will be 8 live polling questions, and then we'll have a Q&A at the very end. And if you're not familiar with Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little Q&A image. So if you click on that, you can type in questions. So we'll be monitoring those and we'll answer at the end. If you have technical issues, you can post something in the chat box, and we have a few people that can help you work your way through that. But with that, I will hand it over to Mike. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Hillary. So I guess we'll just start off and get with the first polling question and find out who's out there in Zoom land that's watching this presentation. So we're going to get to the first polling question. It should pop up on your screen. So if you are represented by, or if you're just a community member, a neighborhood group, a developer home builder, realtor, commissioner, historic preservationist, community organization, just please select 1 or 2 that you belong to, multiple choice, and then submit that, and we can get the live polling questions and the answers will pop up. So feel free to click those now, and we'll see how that goes. Did Hillary, were you able to get those to post those up?
We're still waiting for a couple respondents. Okay. We're pretty close. I think we have 28 out of 32 people have responded. So
okay,
I think we're pretty close. I can share what we have now. Oh, okay. We got another one in there. Okay. Can you see the results?
Oh yeah. So we have some community members as the majority. So that's good to see. That's a good variety.
Yes, looks really good. I'll stop sharing so you can move on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, so let's start off with what is the Core Housing Code? And so we're looking at infill housing, so we wanted to come up with a mission statement, so to drive and guide us through the new code. So the mission statement is to create a new infill housing code that will allow additional housing units that are quality in design in areas of the city that are appropriate. But what is infill housing? What does that look like? So what are we talking about here? Infill housing is defined as new housing units constructed on vacant or underused lots, generally in existing neighborhoods. It also allows for additional housing product types and on existing lots, and it utilizes existing infrastructure. Infill is the repurposing of obsolete and underutilized sites within the existing city limits. So here's some visual examples of what core housing is. You got triplex here that's stacked. You got infill housing units based off of a driveway, and you got some townhomes. It's pretty similar core housing examples. So what is core housing? So it's based off of missing middle housing. And missing middle housing is the housing that's not represented by the community. We do this really well in downtown core. Out on the prairie, we got single family, duplex, and ADUs. And ADUs are accessory dwelling units. So what we're missing are this infill area here, this area between single family and the downtown, townhomes, multiplexes, courtyard apartments, triplexes, and fourplexes. So that is the basis for the missing middle, which is the basis for the core housing. So in August of 2019, we had a missing middle forum that was held at North Idaho College, and that was put on by Opticos Consulting out of California. And some takeaways from that, that there is a need for infill housing in the city. Not all neighborhoods should be designated for infill development, and ensure that established neighborhoods won't be negatively impacted. So design of the units is also very important. Good quality and design is a very important aspect for infill housing. Density should decrease as you move away from the downtown core and allow for a variety of housing types. Various densities and styles within residential neighborhoods, and the units should be house scale if they're located in a residential neighborhood. So a little history on infill housing in the city. So the city of Coeur d'Alene has been doing infill housing since the 1980s. And we started out with cluster housing in 1988, and that went through 2007. Pocket housing came on after that, and that was 2007 to 2017. After that, staff started working on the ADU code development in 2019. Again, that's an accessory dwelling unit, which is in a carriage house unit or apartment above a garage, associated with a single family dwelling. And then we had the missing middle housing forum at NIC in August, and then the ADU code was adopted in September of 2019, and then the core housing development began in the beginning of 2020. So core housing, the viability of this proposed code is approximately 15 years, around from 2021 to 2035. So we formed the committee in January, and the first meeting was in February, and there's a list of the members of our core housing committee. And we've got a very good selection and a good variety of people from different backgrounds and aspects in the community. So, and some of them are here today to speak on a couple of aspects of core housing. So we met and had these workshops, and I'm going to go over some of the discussion items that we talked about. And the first one was the naming and branding of the new infill code. We wanted to come up with something unique, something we could take ownership of. So we came up with core housing. It's not any city USA. It's unique to Coeur d'Alene. It's something that we could take pride in. It's something that we could really develop really well. So we came up with core housing. You see the logo down here on the right. And then from other discussion items, we talked about what is to protect some existing single family neighborhoods. We did a mapping exercise. We talked about Transect planning, which talks about density higher in downtown core towards the city center, and as you move away, less dense. And we talked about livability and walkability aspects, housing types and unit counts, what is appropriate building height, how it should be compatible with adjoining neighbors. We talked about second and third story step back, which is kind of consistent with our ADU code. We talked about lot sizes to allow for infill housing. What are the minimum and maximums? We then discussed parking requirements, size of parking spaces, how many should be required. Then we got into design standards, form-based codes. What are some design things that we would like to see in the new code? We talked about setbacks, lot coverage and open space, the unit sizes, the number of units, lot sizes for each kind of core housing type. So min maxes for that. And then should a land survey be required to ensure setbacks are met? We've just covered all those items with the group. So what are the minimum maximum lot sizes for core housing? So to qualify for core housing, we've started out with what's the the city lot size. The typical city lot is 5,500 square feet. And the committee came up with that it should be the appropriate size to qualify for core housing is 8,250 square feet, which is approximately 1.5 city lots. So then we wanted to the maximum lot size. What would be appropriate for the maximum lot size? And the committee came up with 6 city lots, which is approximately 33,000 square feet. If you have anything larger like an acre, 2-acre lots, which are kind of rare in the city, if you had those, then you would just do the typical zoning. So what are the surrounding conditions for the city of Coeur d'Alene? Right now, you have to the north, we have Dalton Gardens, city of Hayden, we got Post Falls to the west. To the east, we got the Canfield Mountains and the lakes to the south and the Spokane River. So as you can see, there's limited areas left for the city to annex in. So we have to look inward and how can we do that well? So a little bit of population information and housing needs. So in 1980, the city's population was around 20,000 people. And by the turn of the century, by the year 2000, we had 34,000 people, and cluster housing was under that time period. And then by 2020, we're projected to have 52,000 people, and we'll find out the new information when the U.S. Census information comes out later next year. but it should be right around 52,000 people. And the time frame for this core housing code is for 15 years, so it'll take us to 2035, and that's projected to be 75,000 people living in the city of Coeur d'Alene. So a little bit of housing characteristics. Right now, this is from the 2018 census, stating that we do well in the single family and duplex, but our needs are 3 and 4 and 5 and 9 units and more. So this is where core housing is going to focus on, 3 units and above. So we have a committee member that's here today to speak a little bit. His name is Josh Schur. He's with the CDA Association of Realtors, and he's also was nominated as Realtor of the Year. So Josh, if you have a moment, could you please speak about some housing needs in the real estate market?
All right. Thank you, Mike, Hillary, and thanks for involving us in this. These work groups are always extremely valuable because it gets a wide range of opinions. Our big hot topic that we've been kind of a broken record on lately is affordability. And our market right now is a little bit of a perfect storm. You have a high demand of people moving from out of town, low supply, interest rates are still low, and it's creating this frenzied market that is very far from a buyer's market, and it's driving prices up like crazy. And you can see the projections for population. So we believe that a healthy real estate market really has a wide range of ownership products at different price points, not just apartments and $1 million homes. So this core housing is really a great step in the right direction to try to accomplish that. It gives developers, builders the tools to create these products in an infill environment that fill a need and really work extremely well with the community. So that's all I've got, and I'll be around if anyone has any questions.
All right, thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. So we'll move on to our next polling question. We have heard at the Missing Middle Forum that more housing types and choices are needed in Coeur d'Alene to meet our current and future housing needs. Do you agree? Yes, no, or unsure? Please select your answers now. Okay, it just popped up on the screen for everyone. So if you agree or disagree or unsure, please select that now, and that will be submitted, and Hillary will be able to let us know what those answers are.
Yep, we have the answers coming in. It's looking
okay.
Okay, I think we'll end the polling. It looks like we have everybody except for the panelists that have participated in this one. So I'll share the results. You see those?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So most of you agree at 70%, so that is nice. Moving on. So planning principles for livability and walkability. We wanted to talk about livability focuses on placemaking, and placemaking is the design of public spaces to encourage the public gathering and engagement. Walkability is vital in the livability aspect of a city. So we also looked at a 5-minute walking distance as the radius a person would likely walk as a primary means of transportation for frequent trips. And a typical block in the downtown area is 300 feet, so you get an idea it's about 3 blocks. So we looked at best practices and suitability. So preserve and protect existing historic single-family neighborhoods. Quality and design of the infill housing units increases the livability aspect. Core housing proximity principle. So we want to make sure that core housing is located in a walking distance to ped bike areas, walking distance to public transportation routes, and walking distance to employment centers and commercial nodes. Core housing should also allow for density decreasing as you move away from the city center. So this is the walkability map that was produced from those distances from ped bike trails, community, commercial centers and retail areas, and public transportation routes. So the next question, what do you think are the most important aspects for determining appropriate locations for core housing? the walkability, bikeability, proximity to jobs and employment centers, proximity to public transportation, or if the neighborhood is historic or not, or all of the above, or unsure. Hillary will post those questions and please select those and we can add, she can report the results.
Okay, results are coming in.
All right.
Okay, it looks like we have most of the votes in. I will share the results with you.
Oh, nice. So walkability was the winner in this one, but everyone thought they were all important. A couple were unsure, but that is good.
Yeah.
All right, so introduction to Transect planning model. The rural to urban Transect is divided into 6 zones. And you can see the natural zone is out here and it's usually large tracts, 20 to 40 acres and beyond. And then the rural area, you got 5 and 10 acre tracts here. And then in this Transect zone, you start getting city services. You know, the lots are smaller, you get sidewalks, so you got sewer and water. And as you get closer to the downtown core, you get taller buildings and more dense buildings. So here's the Transect illustrating that in a 3-dimensional view. As you can see, the 6 transects, but for the city of Coeur d'Alene, there are not natural areas like large 100-acre tracts. There's not 20, 40-acre tracts. We have tracts with city services, you know, smaller subdivisions out on the prairie, and as you move to the center, you get higher to the city center. So there'll be 4 transect areas for the city. And here's a visual illustration of, like, you know, the urban core here, and as you move away from the city, the unit sizes changes and the spacing changes as well. And the rural aspect is not a part of the Coeur d'Alene, city of Coeur d'Alene. So here's a map illustrating those relationships to the downtown and how they're buffered off the downtown for the 4 transect areas. So do you agree that allowable housing types and the sizes, the number of units of the core housing project should generally increase as you get closer to the downtown? Yes, no, it depends, or I'm unsure. And Hillary will post those for us so that we can select those. And once it pops on your screen, please answer the poll and we'll get those in.
Okay, the results are in. Can you see those?
Oh yeah, it says it depends. A lot of people were unsure on that, and that is a true point. Depends on if you're closer to commercial, closer to a trail. All right, so for core housing, we took the walkability map and we overlaid it with the relation to the downtown core to come up with the core housing areas. So we found a core housing area map, which kind of like if you wouldn't do a multiplex large here, and you wouldn't do you would do a multiplex large closer to the downtown, but not out here out on the prairie where you have single family dwellings. It wouldn't be compatible or with that type of use. So the core housing types, what are they? Let's talk about those core housing types. It's not single family and ADUs and duplexes, and it's not the high rises downtown. It's triplexes, fourplexes, cottage court, tiny house court, courtyard apartments, townhomes, live work units, multiplex smalls, and multiplex large. So what are those, you say? They are these. So here's some visual illustrations, some triplexes and fourplexes, illustrating what that might look like in a live work unit where you work below and live upstairs. And the cottage court, we have small cottages facing the center with a green space in the middle. And then the courtyard building apartments, kind of, people said this is like the Melrose Place apartment complex. You got a patio and an open space area in the middle. And then a tiny house court, which we're working with the building department, and they're looking at adopting a new tiny house code that will be compatible with the core housing. So that it'd be tied to the building department's tiny house code. So townhomes, that would be another product. Multiplex larges, which is 11 to 20 units, and multiplex small, 6 to 10 units. So I don't know if James is on the line. He had a meeting prior to, but he's with the Habitat for Humanity of North Idaho. He's the executive director, and see if he had a moment to speak on housing needs and options. Is James there?
He did join us, it looks like, Mike. So let's see.
Okay.
There you go.
There you are.
I forgot
Perfect.
to unmute. I apologize.
Oh, not a problem.
So thanks for the opportunity. And I think it's a really important topic to talk about. You know, at Habitat for Humanity, we're obviously focused on development that helps impact people, you know, in the lower income ranges. We don't always talk about, you know, what that means for the larger community and the plans for the community in terms of development. When you talk about a lot of these options aren't the kind of options, no matter the format, whether it's a triplex or a you know, multi-unit large building. If it's located in downtown and it's close to amenities and in the area of the city that people want to live, it's not really going to end up being an affordable unit. But the point is, like Josh talked about, there's a lack of supply. And so if there is somebody who makes a little bit more money, they're in the maybe median income range, but they don't have the option to move into this unit because it's just not there, they're forced to look elsewhere. And they're going to eventually move down the, you know, affordability list to maybe another unit that they can afford, but isn't in their maximum range or maybe what they want if they had a choice to, you know, any unit being available. So when you increase supply in this, you know, core housing, the middle housing, what it really does is it allows some of those alternative units, maybe the, you know, lower cost apartments that are farther away from the downtown core area where all the amenities are, some of those other things would be more available to somebody else because people who can and are willing to go to the nicer, newer units will make that choice. And then the, you know, opening, the availability is there in the other housing options that might be the less expensive housing options in an older building, something along those lines. There are obviously new developments that are targeted towards people specifically for low income, such as what we build or some of the other, you know, apartment complexes that are built specifically for that purpose. But the majority of all housing is not targeted towards low income. It's just, you know, mid-range, upper range, low range. It goes across the board. So the idea is that more supply makes it better for everybody, really, and that does also impact, you know, the people at the bottom that need the affordable unit as well.
Thanks, James. That leads right into our next polling question. Do you think that allowing more housing choices within the city is important for current and future residents? Yes, no, or unsure? He'll post those questions for us to answer. Go and select your answer and submit that, and we can see the results. Were you able to post those, Hillary?
It looks like we have, let's see, a few more coming in. So
Okay.
we're close. Okay,
Oh,
can you
yes.
see those?
Yes, nice.
Okay.
Yes, definitely there's a need and that people feel that more choices are better. All right, moving on to some examples of some of these housing types. So we got some Cottage Court, as you can see the green space in the middle and the houses facing the center. Here's another image of the Cottage Court. And each one of the products will have its own unique setbacks and standards and height requirements that'll come with a spec sheet for each one. Fourplex units, typically with 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. And they'll come with unique specifications for each one of these units as well. So core housing isn't going to have one, you know, like one size fits all these units. Each one of these will have a unique set of standards tied to them. So we have a live work unit where you can work downstairs, live upstairs. And this is another typical, not a typical one, but a different type of model. But yeah, as you can see, the new economy is changing, and maybe this will be a product that may be more in demand in the future. And they'll have their own unique specifications for the live-work units, talking about the size and the height and the setbacks. So then we have the multiplexes. You can have a large multiplex and then a small multiplex. And again, those will have their own set of unique specifications as well. And then the townhomes along the street, where you can see you can have one owner, you can have ownership shared by a wall, and the land underneath is owned by the person, so they can have unique ownership, so long as there's city services with one lot and one lateral that can serve each of those units. If not, they can be in one large parcel that can be rented out. And there's the townhomes. And the next polling question: would you or your family member consider living in one of the proposed core housing types now or in the future? And maybe you're an empty nester or a young person, or you want to live in one of these. So please answer the questions when Hillary posts them, and we get the results. Oh, yeah.
Hey, can I see those?
Yes, I can. Thank
Okay.
you. Yeah. The majority said yes. They feel that they could see themselves living in one of these now or in the future. All right, so we're getting into neighborhood compatibility. There are already examples of existing core housing in our older neighborhoods. Large single-family homes have been converted into multiple units. Some older mixed-use buildings have been converted into apartments. So some of the older neighborhoods in the downtown area have historic designations or are in the process of becoming a historic district. Such neighborhoods are the Fort Grounds and soon-to-be Garden District. Other neighborhoods with historic merit are East Mullen Historic District and Sanders Beach, and could become future historic districts. There may be others also. The City Historic Preservation Plan is just beginning, and historic buildings, districts, and neighborhoods will be evaluated, as well as the zoning code, to see how zoning may impact historic properties. So, core housing planning consideration. Should there be restrictions on the types of infill housing units that are appropriate in neighborhoods with historic designation / district? And should historic neighborhoods be exempt from core housing? So those are things to consider. So here's a map visualizing, how some of these units could be compatible, but maybe some neighborhoods maybe need to stay single family and ADUs. So here's some pictures of some existing single family dwellings and something that might not be compatible. So we have a core housing member, Kevin Jester, is with us today to speak a little bit about neighborhood compatibility and historic neighborhoods. Kevin, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And again, echo what some of the other panel members have said. Thank you, Hillary and Mike, for putting together such a good presentation here. It's easy to follow, good graphics, and so I really appreciate the quality of what you're doing here. Neighborhood compatibility, it's a tough consideration because design, its best and its worst, is always subjective. And I think you all know what I mean. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so it's really kind of hard to get real specific with it. I think the best case scenario is that you take a look at it on a case-by-case basis in the neighborhoods, and you look at the context and the vernacular of the neighborhood, and do the best to not upset that. I think the goal is always to maintain or add to the quality of the neighborhood with any kind of development, especially in established and older neighborhoods that have a specific vernacular to them that really wouldn't want to see that upset. So, going back to what I said, design is in the eye of the beholder. and we take it on a case-by-case basis. And hopefully, like I said, whatever happens is a positive input to the neighborhoods.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
That moves us on to our next polling question. Should the core housing code apply differently to historic neighborhoods? So we got a variety of answers. Core housing should be excluded from neighborhoods with historic designations. There should be restrictions on the types of core housing that are allowed in historic neighborhoods. This should be studied further with input from neighborhoods, the city's Historic Preservation Commission, and the Historic Preservation Plan Consultant, or unsure. Hillary will post those for us now so we can answer those. Please check all that apply.
Okay, the results are still coming in.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see those?
Oh, yes. So there should be a study with further input.
Yep, definitely the top pick under that one.
Yes. Okay, good. Let's move on to the next part. And that's design elements under consideration. So we met with the core housing committee. We went over all of these aspects as far as design elements. And so I'm just going to kind of go over this with you, everyone. So we talked about the mix of materials, roof pitch modulation, talked about scale, massing and modulation, landscaping, lighting, the screening of trash cans and garbage. We talked about garage door design, street frontage facade, dispersion requirement, ground level rooftop equipment, townhome, cottage home variation, ground level enhancement front porch, and blank wall treatments. I'll kind of go over a couple of the slides to kind of visualize what those mean. But to start off, this is kind of some of the examples that why pocket housing was repealed. So this is a slide showing an example of what was under the code, the previous code allowed, and what the new code is trying to come up to make it a little bit better. So we talked about mix of materials, a change of materials, colors, and textures on building elements to encouraged to provide further articulation and additional variety and craftsmanship. So adding brick, different materials to make the building not just one blank piece of material. So we talked about roof pitch modulation and how that helps in the design. We talked about keeping it, the scale should be human scale for the streetscape, and also that if it's in a residential neighborhood, it should be compatible with the adjoining houses. Massing and modulation, we talked about modulation with the group, and we thought that putting a hard number down as 30 feet was not a good requirement, that we shouldn't be that strict in the code. So, but we wanted to put just some of the topics that we did talk about. Landscaping example, we talked about landscaping and what kind of requirements would be meant for that, and not all products would be the same requirement. Like for townhome would be different from a fourplex. So we wanted to make sure that landscaping was incorporated in the design, and then also the lighting. We didn't want lighting overpowering, so we wanted to make sure we had full cutoff lighting headed downwards, and it wasn't blinding everybody. And then we talked about trash enclosures and the screening of trash to make sure that was talked about and discussed. And then we talked about garage door design and how that a unique garage door can sometimes enhance the quality of the product. We also talked about street frontage design elements, building orientation. All building elevations adjacent to the street right away shall provide doors, porches, balconies, and/or windows So we wanted to make sure that the street was addressed with a good facade. And then we talked about design elements is for equipment. So you got ground level equipment that you see. There's gas meters here, and here you can't even see the gas meter because it is screened properly. And then you got another gas meter here, and then you kind of have it screened. So we talked about that to kind of design elements. We also talked about rooftop equipment, the screening of that, and how that would be a good part to have in the code. So then the variations examples, we've looked at the different building variations instead of just one design tied together. So kind of break it up and make it a little unique. And then we talked about visible ground level porch, the front porch entrance, make sure each dwelling unit must have a separate ground level entrance. Units that front the public street, so have entrances facing the public street. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing that, not just a blank wall facing the street, make it more inviting. And we talked about blank wall treatments, untreated blank walls visible from a public street, pedestrian oriented space, common unusable open space, or pedestrian pathway are prohibited. So we wanted to make sure this is an example of the city of Bozeman's code that we were addressing that in the new code. So we have Dennis Cunningham with us today. He's with Active West Builders, and he's going to speak a little bit about housing design principles. Dennis, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hey, thank you for the presentation so far and the other panelists. Maybe I can just iterate what Josh and James said as we move into design principles and standards. As we look at a supply issue and a continued demand on our housing product, we're seeing our prices go up. And as you guys know, or us in the building industry and development, the more criteria we put on the exterior of these buildings or the way they get site designed is probably dollars. And as you can see, some of the buildings are getting bigger. The skin on the building is getting bigger, larger. So we do want to, there needs to be a balance with the level of our design principles that we put on the housing process or the building permit process, so we can still meet a relative reasonable housing price. I don't want to use the word affordability because Coeur d'Alene's been found, and that's a challenge in itself. And even as Kevin mentioned prior, compatibility. You were in an area that's older, less materials, and we put a modern structure there, and it's required to have 5 different materials on it. I think we also have to look at that compatibility. So this is a difficult item for me to speak on as a developer builder, because I'm challenged right now with increase of cost and materials that have to go on buildings, even if they're not in a core housing, and that's driving prices. So it's a sensitive topic. I respect it, and I enjoy building nice homes, but I also know the pendulum has to swing both ways as we look at the money coming in and our median income in our county and what our people need as well. Nice.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate that. Let's move us right on to the next question. Do you agree that the design and the quality of housing are important aspects that should be incorporated into the core housing code? Yes, no, or unsure? Please select your answers now, and Hillary will tally those votes.
Okay, the votes are rolling in. Okay, I think we have most of the answers in at this point.
Nice.
Okay, can you see those?
Yeah, so overwhelming, pretty large amount. Think that Design and quality should be incorporated into the code. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to how will this work? So the building permit process, like question, how would this actually work? So let's kind of go over that process for a minute. So we have the core housing areas, and then we go to the GIS mapping to locate where your address. You type in your address. That would come up where you live and your property that you're interested in, and you see that you're in the T3A area. So what does that mean? So like we said, we have different products would be allowed in different areas according to intensity and use. So for example, this example, we're going to look at a fourplex that would be allowed in this area. So we'll have a core housing handout. Obviously that would be in the code as well, but we'll have these handouts set up and ready to go for each one of the products, where you can see the name of the product, what zones they're allowed in, what are the parking requirements, some site development standards, and maybe some design requirements, and then the setbacks. So everything will be there in a handout form as part of this toolkit for the core housing. So that moves us on into where have we been? So like we said, we started the core housing committee in January, and we had our first workshop in February, and we've held 6 workshops. And this is the one you can see with the asterisks at the bottom is the community meeting that we're having today. That moves us on to where are we going? So we're looking at another workshop in January with the committee, and then a joint workshop with the Planning Commission and City Council in February, and then a public hearing with the Planning Commission in March, and a anticipated adoption in April with City Council. And again, this is all tentative schedule, so I just wanted to reiterate that. And now we'll go into questions and answers with any of the panelists and myself. So, Hillary, do you have any questions out there?
We do have some questions, yes. So let's go ahead and open some of these up. All right, so we have a question. The first one is, what has been the input and participation of neighborhoods? And so that's a great question. And that is one of the reasons we're having this meeting this evening, is because we really want to get more input. So we do have Kevin Jester on the committee representing neighborhood groups, especially the more historic neighborhoods, offering that perspective. We worked with our committee to make sure we really had some diversity and different perspectives as well. So I think that's been really important, but we really wanted to hear from our community members. And it looks like, based on the polling response this evening, that we're going to need to do some more work with our neighborhood groups, our Historic Preservation Commission, and that consultant that's helping us with the plan, especially to look at the historic areas. Any other panelists want to weigh in on that question?
Oh, we'll also have another, when we could take this to Planning Commission, there'll be a public opportunity there, and it's City Council, there'll be a public opportunity there too. And we may have another workshop to put in there if need be.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. How is a underutilized lot defined? And that was from our definition of infill housing, is kind of where we referred to an underutilized lot. And so I guess that's kind of subjective, like design, but that's something where if there is a house with maybe a home that looks like it's outlived its useful life, or there's just an outbuilding and there's no house on the property, things like that, it could be underutilized. There's also cases where someone might have 4 city lots and just 1 house. And so while that's great, if someone wants a large lot, then you might be looking at it saying, well, there's 3 other buildable lots within the city. So I think that would be one way to describe that. Any other feedback on that question?
I think you answered it well. Yeah, it's basically, if someone had an older house, they're making the decision, well, should I remodel it, or maybe should I tear it down and try something different? Yeah.
Right. So this question is, what other cities have implemented this infill style housing, and what was the impact on crime rates? So we did a lot of research, and Mike might want to reference some of the communities, but in working with Opticos last year on that Missing Middle Housing Forum, we looked at a lot of the communities in which they've done work. And so that was really helpful for us, just to see who's embracing this type of housing, this missing middle housing. We didn't find any correlation to the impact on crime rates, because this truly is house scale development. This isn't major developments. And especially
Right.
how Opticos has looked at it, it's usually just kind of, it might be one lot. We're looking at up to six. Is that what we had, Mike? Six city
That's
lots
correct.
would be kind of the maximum size. So it really has some sideboards, so it wouldn't be a huge project. I know Kevin, I don't know if you want to weigh in, but I know you were involved in some of the work with Fort Grounds when we were looking at kind of that neighborhood compatibility and looking at Austin and some other communities on how do you do this in a way that's not going to have a negative impact? Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I can certainly try to. I can't answer it specifically with any kind of data with regard to crime rates. I think that the missing middle housing that we are considering does not add the kind of density that I believe will have a huge impact on a neighborhood. Now, once again, that's just one man's opinion here. So I'm not sure that we're going to find the kind of data related to this specific type of infill housing and crime rate. I don't know that we're going to find that kind of data. I think when we get into higher density, there's probably more readily available data, but certainly haven't researched it. So that's about all I can add to that right now.
Thank you for weighing in. James, are you aware of anything in your research?
So I'll unmute here. We generally don't see crime rates related to people who are able to afford the cost of rent. Crime tends to exist in families and in housing situations that are unstable, and that leads to other situations. I think most people would agree that at any level of affordability right now, the stability of the community is relatively reasonable, even if there are people who are struggling more than others. But honestly, for this specific topic, I'd have to give the same answer as Kevin. I don't have, research or specific information on this, to that level of detail.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, how do you see R34 in terms of the density, so 34 units per acre and height, fitting in to your infill plans? And so the core housing has nothing to do with R34. It would be completely different. And that's one of the things through that Missing Middle Housing Forum we talked about last year, was that this really should be house scale. This shouldn't be a large apartment complex, and the height would be limited as well. I know Mike ran through some of those slides with the group, but looking at more, the 45 foot would be the maximum height for some of the housing types, and probably less for some of the others, closer to the 32 or 35 feet in the residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So it would be completely different than the R34 projects. So, and it would not result in large apartment projects either, was the second part of this. Aren't large apartment buildings destructive of neighborhoods, they asked. So again, the multiplex large would be the biggest product.
One building too.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question, where and how did you notify the public of this meeting? So we did send out a press release, but it didn't look like the press ran anything with that. But we did share information on the city's website and Facebook, and sent emails to the neighborhood groups. We asked North Idaho Building Contractors Association and the Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors to spread the word.
Yes.
Okay. Clearly other cities have done this in the past. I guarantee there is data out there. Okay, so is that related to crime, I'm guessing? So that's something we would have to look into, because again, we've not seen any studies showing that.
No.
There's a question about, is impact on schools considered? That's something where we have not had that direct conversation with the school district, because it's more house scale and it's, either 1.5 city lots or 6 lots. It's not a big project. So there wouldn't be an impact as there might be if someone's doing a master plan development, a large planned unit development, or a large apartment complex. So yes, there could be small impacts on the schools, and it probably depends on the housing type, because, you never know if a townhouse is going to attract a family, or if it's going to be someone that's, a young professional or some, empty nester. So it probably really depends. We could certainly weigh in, get the school district to weigh in, but I don't think that they would be able to have very specific metrics on that, just because again, the housing it's smaller scale. It's not intended to be a big project.
Right.
Any other panelists want to weigh in on that particular question about school impacts?
Hillary, I think that you answered it very well. And I agree with that. I don't think that the density that we're talking about will have a significant impact with regard to schools. This is not like clustering a bunch of infill housing together. It's truly infill. It's just in these areas where it's appropriate. So I don't think the density is going to cause a huge impact on the school.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. All right, here's a question. In addition to simply trying to live with and meet future housing demand, oh, wait. There we go. Shifting on my screen. Okay. Did committee also look at possible policies for the city to address the other half of the equation, moderating growth to reduce demand? For example, moderating growth via the city's comprehensive plan. So we are currently working on our comprehensive plan update. That's the Envision Coeur d'Alene project, and they're working hand in hand. So core housing is an aspect of the comprehensive plan. It's one of the action items to evaluate ways to allow compatible growth to happen, because we know growth will occur. Coeur d'Alene's becoming more and more popular. And so we want to make sure we can accommodate growth without wrecking or having any negative impacts on our neighborhoods. We want to maintain the integrity of our neighborhoods and our great community. So that's something we're really looking at through the comprehensive plan. But this is, as I mentioned, it's working really well in alignment with that. So any other panelists want to weigh in? Okay.
Hillary,
Yes.
I have that one written down on population. Many years ago, the limit of population that I recall was about sewer. It's how many flushes the wastewater treatment plant can take. Now, technology has changed and all that over the years, but that was always the limit. And as I recall, council went to the sewer guys and go, okay, how many flushes can you take? It tells us how much population we can handle here. Now we're starting to tweak it a little, right, with different sized housing and more intense housing, I guess I would say, more flushes. I'd keep it real simple. So I always wondered, we haven't had that discussion in probably 10 years, 12 years on the council side, where they say, how big do you want to get? Well, we just want to keep growing. Well, maybe not, And how much flushing do you want? How many water wells do you want? Those are the kinds of things that at least many years ago were projected. They were kind of talked about as, do we want to build houses on the mountains? And guess what? No. And the only way you could control that was you don't give them any flushes. So you don't have the hills covered with homes. So it's an interesting to hear that again, but in a different mode. And I think the infill doesn't impact the sewer that much, but I like the idea of thinking about the future and maybe drawing a line or going, wait, do we want to do this? Do we want to be bigger? Do we want to be taller? And the technology is what is really keeping us growing. As far as, again, the real basic stuff, sewer, everything's got to go somewhere. So food for thought.
Yes, thank you, Woody, for weighing in on that.
Yeah.
So as part of the comprehensive plan, we are working with all of our city departments, and wastewater is looking for our information to update their wastewater master plan. And it does look, though, like our projections for growth are consistent with the KMPO, so Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization modeling, and the numbers we've had before for the sewer capacity. So we're not looking at any huge growth. I think it's still consistent with what we've seen over the years, even with the influx of people. So we're definitely managing growth. The next question is, please discuss max heights in 1 to 2 floor neighborhoods. And that is, I think I already commented on that just depending on where the core housing allowed and what core housing product types are allowed. So if it's in the residential areas, we would likely see the 32 to 35 feet height. Is that correct, Mike? On just
That's correct. We
those
want to
types?
be compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're in a residential neighborhood, we're looking at 32 feet, which is currently the max size for a single family dwelling.
Right.
And we were looking maybe even to go into 35, but that would be like 3 feet for an adjustment. So
And that's consistent with the infill districts currently, they're 35.
yes, that is,
There were a few place or product types that could be maybe 45 max. Was that more of the live work
that wasn't,
product
that was like
types and
only
the
allowed like
multiplex?
closer to the city center.
Okay.
too. It wouldn't,
Okay.
it wasn't allowed in other areas.
Okay, great. So the next question, all right, let's see here. Okay. How do you prevent large numbers of people from tearing down their houses in downtown Coeur d'Alene to build fourplexes? So that is where the group was looking at the minimum lot size. There has to be at 1.5 lots in order to even qualify for core housing. And then depending on that map that you saw, the core housing, where core housing would be allowed, which is based on zoning, proximity to the downtown, the services, public transportation, trails, all of that. That would kind of help say what products are even allowed. But that's really is a discussion also that ties in well with that historic neighborhood conversation. So depending on the other input we get after this meeting this
Yeah.
evening, I think that could be an important thing for us to, weigh in and say, okay, well, so if these historic areas should either have restrictions on the core housing that's allowed or not allowing core housing, because that could lead to more houses being torn down. So that is an important question to be considered. Any other panelists want to weigh in on that one?
Let me ask if, I'm going to use the Fort Ground for an example. When you come around the Dyke Road and you're driving along the lake, and all of a sudden, right at the end, as you get close to the park, everything has changed. These old classic homes seem to be gone, and these more modern, and I know they're not core housing, but that whole look has changed there. And we talk about Fort Ground being classic and historic and stuff, but yet people still should be able to do what they want with their dirt, with their land, right? Do you follow that kind of how I'm looking at that? I'm sort of looking at Front Street here from 8th to 15th. All of a sudden there's this evolution of these old little, I don't know what you would call that style home, but all of a sudden people are improving them and making them cool and doing landscaping. And I always wonder is that what we're trying to do, is to set a standard or just give people some flexibility to build some cool stuff, And the historic side of it befuddles me sometimes. So what is historic when the neighborhood chooses we want to be historic, but I want to do something different? Does that create a dilemma, do you think, going down that path? Or is it based around, again, minimum lot size, 1.5 lots to be able to even consider this? Is that the saving grace, maybe?
So you raised a couple of issues. So
Sorry.
it's okay. So
It only sticks for a while,
That's okay. So some of the development you're talking about, so on Front Street, for example, people just remodeling a house,
Right.
demolishing a house, building a new house, all of that's not going to be affected. That's completely different. If it's just a single lot, that's just someone building another house in that place. Or if they have a zoning district that already allows it, this is something new. This is taking the place of the previous code. So we had the cluster housing before, then we had pocket housing. Both were repealed because they had some neighborhood compatibility issues, and some great products came out of them and some unintended consequences that were not so great came out of a few of those. So we're looking at, what should be the next iteration, like Mike said, it's the next 15 years. And so core housing really it's supposed to be kind of a smaller footprint than some of those. So the pocket housing allowed, I think, up to 5 acres, and then 5 acres or larger, you had to do a planned unit development. That's huge. So we're trying to scale that back and say core housing should be 6 lots maximum. If you're bigger than that, you're either going to, do your own development under the current zoning code, or if you're 1.5 acres, you can do a planned unit development. We're not trying to get into that mix. For historic, that's a little different too, because any of these neighborhoods have to go through a very formal process with the State Historic Preservation Office to do that, to designate a neighborhood as historic. And so they have to qualify, they have to have buildings that have merit, that should be protected. And then it's kind of up to the neighborhood to say, yes, we want to have that designation. So, and then it's, up to the neighborhood and the city working together to say, well, are they okay with modern houses being built next to historic? That's to be determined, but very complex issue when it comes to kind of the historic neighborhoods. A lot of people move to them because of the nature of the homes and kind of the character and the older trees and all of that. So that's something that it definitely needs to be discussed further. Other panelists want to weigh in on the multi-part question?
Yeah, I'll weigh in just briefly here. I think anytime you get into design and what that means to people, I refer back to what I said, that it's subjective. And with all due respect for Woody, I think you make really good points, but a classic old bungalow is cool as well. Cool is in the eye of the beholder. I think what we're looking for when we talk about some of the older neighborhoods that already have a specific character to them is to maybe not violate that character. You can still do cool in there, but don't violate the character of that neighborhood with what you're doing. That's kind of the thought behind that. And there's a lot of latitude in there, I believe.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, next question. Is traffic and parking being looked at? And yes, the group has looked at parking for core housing, and it's going to kind of depend on what is the core housing product type and how many parking spaces would be triggered and where it is in the city, right? Mike, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Yes, that's true. What different core, like Transect area 1, you'll have less parking requirements because you're closer to the downtown core. But if you're out on the prairie, you're going to have to provide more parking. So the farther away from to get the city, more parking, and if you're closer to the downtown, and parking is less required.
For traffic, we haven't specifically evaluated core housing and traffic because, again, it's smaller scale. So that's something that we could certainly have our city engineer look at, but I would anticipate it would have minimal impacts because, again, it's 6 lots maximum for a project. So it wouldn't have a lot of traffic generated. And when we do our development requests that go to the Planning Commission and City Council, we look at those, and even, apartment complex, a small one, doesn't generate a lot of traffic. So certainly something we could look at, but again, we're trying to keep this smaller scale so it doesn't have a negative impact on our neighborhoods.
Yeah, we're trying to locate them in walkability close to retail and commercial, so people can walk to work, walk to the store, walk back, try more walkable for those larger products.
Okay, so we answered that one. The next one is more of a comment. So saying that they feel this meeting had improper notification to the citizens of Coeur d'Alene. The community should have the opportunity to weigh in on such important decisions that you're planning without their knowledge. Again, this is like Mike said, so we'll have other opportunities for the public. When we do code amendments, we have public hearings with the Planning Commission and the City Council. So we'll certainly do more outreach, as we've heard tonight, especially regarding the neighborhood groups, that we need to have a little more discussion on that topic. So apologize if you weren't aware of it, but it looks like you did because you made it tonight. So thanks for being here. All right, next one. Why less parking closer to the downtown? So that was, and Mike, you might want to weigh in on this a little bit more too, but Opticos has really done a lot of work with their missing middle housing. Yeah. And that's, again, kind of the impetus for this. We looked at their code and are looking at how do we tailor it to Coeur d'Alene. And so that work, as well as our work for East Sherman and having these experts come in and look at it, have said, if you're going to make a project viable, then you really have to evaluate the land costs, the building costs, the parking needs, and especially in the downtown areas, if it is more, like a townhouse or something like that, you're probably going to have less vehicles associated with that than you might have a larger home, a 5-bedroom home or something. So there's ways of looking at that. And we have similar in our current infill districts, there's reduced parking requirements. So it's consistent with that. In order to make it viable, if you stick the same parking requirements or higher, you're not going to get the product type. But obviously there's a balance. So this group was really mindful about, okay, we're not going to, say no parking. We're not going to drop it all the way down to, a half. I think, what did we have? 1.5?
I think it's one.
Kind of depends on, yeah. So depending on the product type, and that information we'll put in the chat, the link to the the Core Housing webpage that has information on the items that have been discussed and consensus on those. So everyone attending can see that information.
But it was like Hillary saying, a lot of these products would not really can happen without the parking being reduced, because it would just be a sea of parking lot and a small little building surrounded by a parking lot. And that's not the intent of the core housing.
Okay, next question. I noticed the committee members are, for the most part, developers and realtor groups. Why are there no community members on the committee? So as I mentioned before, we have Kevin Jester on here, and we really wanted to make sure we did have neighborhood or community member representation. We also have Nicole Kaler with CDA 2030. And then our committee members, even though they might be a developer or a realtor or home builder, they also are community members. And so they understand this balance. And a lot of them, even Shauna, for example, she does smaller scale things. So, they're not doing these big master development projects. So we really wanted to have a balance in our representation on the committee so that we could hear all sides, so that we could really come up with a code that makes sense for the community. Any other comments on that?
I also believe that whenever you're doing a committee like this, that looking at broad stroke, you want to bring years of experience. And I think when you take a look at the people that are on the panel, they do bring a varied and in-depth type of experience to bring this stuff to the surface. So you start there, and then you bring the community in, which is exactly what you're doing. So I think the process is good, and it's a good makeup.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah.
All right, another question, or more comment, I guess. Let's see here. So I know you're calling this infill, but it is low income, high density housing. So we'll address that one first. So that is not what we're doing at all. This is not high density housing. If you look at even the multiplex large, it would not fall into that. And by no means is this low income, as James Casper talked about. So I'll answer the second part of this question, then I'll let James kind of weigh in on the affordability aspect of this. So this individual says they live in Armstrong Park area. Are there any plans for lots here to be used for this type of housing? So I don't recall offhand Armstrong Park's zoning, and I don't know, we'd have to pull up that map.
I think it's R3. It may not qualify.
And then also with, looking at that core housing map. So it's unlikely that a lot of the neighborhoods in that part of the city would have core housing, unless there's areas where they're right next to the trail system. And then we've built in for some of the zoning districts, either it's not allowed or it requires a special use permit, which is the public hearing with notice to the neighbors. So
the neighbors will be notified.
Right. But I guess I'll speak, and then we'll have James weigh in on the affordability aspect. But this code is not, so there is a need for affordable housing in the city, but the core housing is not trying to address that. Where it will hopefully result in more naturally affordable housing just by creating more housing product type. And I think James spoke to that earlier, but this is not intended to just be an affordable housing code. It's really looking at how do we allow additional housing in our community that's currently missing. We have some in our older neighborhoods that has existed for years and works well. And so how do we bring that back? How do we build core housing or missing middle housing again? So James, I don't know if you want to weigh in on the infill housing and low income side of things, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think you have to kind of realize that the base, the floor of the cost to get into a lot in most parts of the city. So for what we're trying to develop at Habitat, which we are truly developing houses, for people who are low income, they're 80% or 60%, median income. For me to be able to do that, even with all the other kind of tricks that I get to pull with volunteer labor and getting some things donated from either community members or businesses, I'm still focused on trying to get to $10,000 per unit in dirt cost. So if I'm buying a lot downtown that's $150,000 and core housing allows me to do a fourplex, I'm nowhere close to $10,000 per unit in dirt cost in terms of trying to develop an end product that's portable. So there's some understanding that affordable housing has other complexities, and I have to do other things to try and get to, other dirt or find other, creative ways to find something that's less expensive than just buying any lots that's available and parking that, into our plan for developing affordable housing. I think the other thing that we all have to talk about, and And there's no silver bullet. You can practically go to any community in this country and find a problem with housing in one way or another, whether it's lack of supply or just general cost, regardless of supply. Housing is a complex, multifaceted problem. And so, to try and give a single answer about what's going to be the perfect thing for everybody in the community when it relates to housing is a pretty hard thing to do. I think the best answer that you're ever going to get about housing policy in relation to affordability, at least some type of affordability for some of the community members, is there has to be some level of balance. And that balance looks different maybe in each area or, this decade compared to next decade. But that's part of it. I mean, it's really going to be one of those things. It's a constant review and kind of self-reflection process, because there's enough factors related to housing that it's hard to have one plan or one set of actions that are really going to take care of all of the, multiple factors that are influencing different people in the community.
Great. Thank you for that. All right.
And I can,
Oh yeah, go ahead, Josh.
Hillary, I can
Yeah.
address the neighborhood question really quick, and feel free to check me on this. But the Armstrong Park concern, a lot of the existing neighborhoods are going to have CC&Rs, those kind of things in place, whether they were a PUD or however they were set up. So this type of product wouldn't apply. So I don't think the concern of somebody coming in and taking 2 lots out of a subdivision and building a 4-plex where the CC&Rs have requirements for square footage and single family use is going to be an issue.
Thank you, Josh. That's excellent point. Yes, you are
Yes.
correct. So a lot of the planned unit developments or projects like that would already restrict it just on its face. So thank you for that. There was a question. Let me go back up a little bit. Can you define cluster and pocket housing, please? So we had cluster housing was allowed in our zoning code. That was the first iteration of this infill housing. And it was dwelling units that are side by side, so more like either duplexes or townhouses, and employ common wall type of construction, or could be separate but grouped together with common open space and vehicular access located on a lot or building site or a portion thereof. So that was kind of that one. There was minimum lot sizes depending on the zoning district, and that one had some neighborhood compatibility issues. So that was repealed. It was replaced by pocket housing. Pocket housing kind of was similar. It was a very similar concept. So it could be either single ownership with multiple lots. It could be separate lots. There was an open space requirement that ended up turning into just kind of people's individual yards oftentimes. As I mentioned earlier, they could go as large as 5 acres, and then 5 acres or larger required a planned unit development. And so it kind of just became this really large, it was hard for staff to manage because it wasn't small like we're looking at with the core housing, where it's okay, just in these areas, these zoning districts, and this size range. If it was overlapping what a planned unit development is, that's harder for staff than just saying it's just a planned unit development. There were definitely some compatibility issues with that as well. Challenges with our subdivision code, with fire department and being able to service some of the material types, a lot of vinyl siding and things that are flammable. So there was a lot of challenges with that code. And so that was repealed and is being replaced with the core housing. Mike, do you want to add anything else on that one?
Yeah, just the pocket housing also had a little aspect with the units were just single family, basically. It really wasn't other style of products so that you could choose from. So
right. And that's a great point, because really with core housing, we're trying to go actually broader. So we're trying to keep it smaller scale. So 6 lots maximum would be your project size. Typically, it's probably just going to be 1.5 lots, but we're allowing more product types that I think is really important and has been missing in our community.
Right.
Okay, so this one is probably a good question for James and Josh. What is the realistic price point we are talking about within the affordable umbrella? And that's probably bigger than just the core housing. That's just what can people afford these days, right?
It is. Affordability is a moving target. I don't even know that we want to keep using the term, but it really just depends on the size. Like James touched on the dirt cost, and that factors, because what I know, obviously we're biased, the Association of Realtors, we'd like to see more ownership products and condos and townhomes and those kind of things that can be individually purchased than a fourplex that would be rented out. But it all comes down to what your dirt costs. Somebody is going to pay $250,000 for something with a house on it that they have to tear down. So they're going to be close to $300,000 into the dirt. And if they can put 2 or 3 units on it, that has to get passed through. So I don't think I can really give an accurate price point. I know right now, if you look for any kind of home in Coeur d'Alene under 400,000, there's about 10 or 11 options on the market. So that's the affordable range as we see it. James, what do you think?
Are you there, James?
We can't.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I was muting my phone and muting the Zoom just to make sure I wasn't talking when I shouldn't be, and I keep forgetting to do both.
No
Okay.
problem. Thank you.
Affordability is a moving target because it's affordability for each individual household income, right? If you're earning $50,000 a year as a household, what you can afford is different than when you're earning 100 or if you're earning 30. So affordable housing really doesn't get to the heart of the issue. It really has to be about different types of options. What Josh is describing in terms of you go look at the availability of an existing single family home or a new single family home, and you pretty much have to talk about $350,000 and above for a purchase price. What that means is right now, half the community can't afford to buy a house, roughly. I mean, you get into more anecdotal, examples where somebody was able to for various reasons, but housing as a purchase option is just not available to most of the community. And so their option then has to be some sort of rental price. And it depends, what they're making, whether affordable rent is $1,200 or, $1,500. But it's the same equation because many rentals are going up in price in the same way that, for sale housing is going up in price. So the availability of an $800 rental unit, 5 years ago compared to today is wildly different. We've had people who have told us that their rent has gone up $200 6 months ago, and now, it's going up $200 again. And so that, accessibility to affordable rent, even for what would be considered, a reasonable income, is significantly impacted by that. And I think, again, I can't give you the silver bullet. It really has to be about balance. If you have only the most expensive homes and only the, higher end of people can afford those, you've got an issue with people who need to live in the community that are working professionals, your CNAs, your medical billing staff, your people who are, really important to the functioning of a community, but are traditionally paid, on a lower end of an income. If they're struggling to live, then the community's got a balance problem in terms of, being able to provide basic services. So again, hard to get at one specific price point to tell you what's affordable because it is a moving target.
Thank you, James. That was great. So next question, isn't this really aimed at Old Coeur d'Alene, south of I-90, east of Northwest Boulevard and north of the lake, where there are no HOAs and CC&Rs? Aren't they vulnerable? And the answer to that is no, not really. So Mike, if you can pull up, would you mind going back to that one, the map, the big map showing?
Yes. I can.
So as Mike had talked about kind of the Transect planning, it really, as you get closer to downtown, you would have more core housing product types available to you, but we're looking at core housing throughout the city in areas that are appropriate. So near services, near employment centers, public transportation, trails. And so kind of looking at, there's other parts of the city north of I-90 that are available for this type of development that could really benefit from it. So I don't know if the group, it looks like you can see that map up on the screen.
Yeah.
But so all those areas that are kind of more of the bold or the brighter colors, those allow for the core housing product types. But again, the whole thing we're trying to do is be sensitive to all neighborhoods, any neighborhood that could have core housing, to make sure we address the design, we're addressing the height, we're addressing the number of units, all those things, just to make sure it is compatible. All right. Would the new core housing codes apply to development of rental housing or just new owner occupied residences? So we've looked at it that it could be both. So that's one of the things, just depending on the product types. The townhouses, it could be someone that owns them and rents them out, or it could be ownership. Same with the cottage housing and the tiny house court. Some of those product types might end up being rentals. The multiplex small and large could be rentals, or they could end up being condo platted and ownership. So it's really a mix. Again, like James said, we're trying to hit both sides of it to say we have needs in our community for people that want to rent and people that want to own. Any other panelists want to weigh in on that one? Okay. Will all this be applicable to existing homes, i.e. if there's a single family home currently, can it be torn down and replaced with an apartment complex? No. So again, you have to have the minimum lot size, so 1.5 lots in order to be able to do core housing, and only if you fall into the areas where you can do it. And Mike, what's your example map where you kind of showed where someone kind of chooses, okay, I'm in this Transect area and I have this zoning. Here's what's allowed. Yeah, maybe that example on the screen. So you can kind of see, it just depends on where you're located, your zoning district, and then that will help determine the type of core housing you can do. And this is just an example. It's not been
This hasn't been, yeah,
fully fleshed out yet.
right.
Okay, and then this is a more specific question for James. While I understand your concern from a 501c3 point of view, there are some concerns that simply are not affordable for anyone. My concern is that we become like Spokane. I see that 2 of the slides contain graphics from Spokane and Bellingham. I personally don't believe we should be using Washington as a model for development here. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles are all examples of low-income housing run amok. I lived in California for most of my life, moved here to escape this kind of development. Orange County was an affluent area until they began this a few decades ago. Housing is still overpriced there, but the quality of life is significantly diminished. James, you want to tackle that one first, and then we can weigh in?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thanks.
I think it's easy to see a perspective because we live through the world through our own life experiences. So I am born and raised in Idaho. I was living and working on my own when I was 15. I would go to school from 8 to 3 and work from 3 to 12, which was a really bad idea, but I did it anyway because I needed to be able to pay for a place to live, right? So in my experience, that was tough. It was not easy to be able to afford, to be able to live by myself. And even as I've moved forward, I've seen the challenges affordable housing, presents at all income levels. I'm doing much better than I was when I was 15, but I still see the complexity of the housing market in Idaho. And so from my point of view, having lived here all my life, I don't see necessarily that just saying, other places seem not to be able to handle it really describes anything about the reality of our situation. We also have not found a perfect solution and have not implemented it to where there is, no problems existing in the housing market and the availability to people at different income levels. So I think, again, it's hard for me to tell you anything other than it's a moving target. It's complex. I had a professor when I was going to school for my master's degree that says we had solved every hard problem 100 years ago, or every easy problem. So that all we have left are large, complex problems. And I think that's kind of the point. If it was easy to solve, we would have figured it out, many, many years ago. So it is a big, complex topic, but I think it is something that is worthwhile to continue to work on, at all levels.
Thank you, James. We did show some photos and some design considerations from other communities, but we were very mindful of what those were. We're definitely not trying to take an approach from a more urban area and say we're applying it here. So I think everyone should be aware of that we're truly having a Coeur d'Alene focus with this core housing. That's why we've called it core housing. We looked at the missing middle, the Opticos does, and they've worked in small communities throughout the country. So they're not just working in urban areas. And so we are being very mindful of that and how we proceed with the code. There was similar questions about that, and we're running out of time, so I'll quickly kind of skip through, but there was another comment about Opticos as being out of Berkeley, and that is true. They said, do you feel someone from a city like Berkeley is a good fit for Idaho. Wasn't there another choice available in Idaho? And so Opticos is the only firm that's really doing that kind of work that we're aware of. And again, we're tailoring this code to Coeur d'Alene, so we didn't feel that that was a concern. We already answered a question about the Armstrong Park, and there's a question about what will there be to prevent developers from building nothing but Airbnb rentals with this plan? So we already have in our city code a short-term rental. And so that requires that you can only do one short-term rental on your property. So one owner, one rental. Now that's different if you have a condominium building, then each owner could have an Airbnb or short-term rental, but you couldn't have an entire multiplex turned into Airbnbs, and you couldn't have, if you owned a cottage court and you owned all of them, they couldn't all be short-term rentals. So we're definitely preventing it through the current code. And I know that was something we worked closely with the Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors in developing that short-term rental code. And some of these are more just comments, it looks like. There's another comment about shortage of homes for sale and that the current prices are high. If you flood the market with this kind of housing, doesn't that have a detrimental effect on prices, i.e. drive down the current individual homes? Josh, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's not, it's not been what we've seen. I mean, in theory, the only way you can fix a demand supply issue is with more supply. So if you create more supply at any price point, you'll create more supply at another. And what I mean by that is, in theory, if we say we need to add 20,000 more units over the next 15 years, if we could build 20,000 $1 million homes, the ones that are there would become the affordable stock. So I think maybe we got carried away with the affordability concept, but this isn't going to create a situation where we're flooding thousands and thousands of units of low priced housing stock in. I don't think that's even feasible from a cost of dirt standpoint.
I would agree with, yep.
This is Dennis Cunningham. I think a couple things to consider. One is the maps that we're showing, a lot of those areas are R8, R12, R17 currently in the city.
Right.
So that zoning allows multifamily. What we're trying to do is put a layer on top of that potentially allows maybe a little bit more quality or control of the city of the type of that housing, so it isn't slapped up and not being regulated as a core housing product. The other is, it's okay to use an example of, are you going to bring my house down? But if a third of the people in our county are single and own a home, maybe they don't want a 3,500 square foot house. Maybe they're living on an income that's not low income, but if their taxes, their housing goes up, their utilities, their health insurance, maybe they don't need as big a product, but want to be close to some of the amenities that you guys have shown. Medical, food, trails, and so less time in a car, less gas or whatever. So I think, where you want to look at this has some applicability to where it could be, to where it might actually raise the value some. We're trying to show that there needs to be landscaping. Your front door can't be in, the alley. Just so I think, and I'm using those as examples, but I think there's some quality that's built into this. The concern is that there's too much quality and we still have to make it somewhat affordable. But sort of addressing, this as a blanket, this isn't changing an R17 so you can go to R34. That's already in place. That's on our zoning map today.
Thank you, Dennis. I think that's really good to point out for our community members that are watching this evening and listening. Yeah, this really is just a different layer in the right areas to allow some additional housing product types. It's not taking away what already exists for people to do things with their properties or what already is allowed. One last question, and then we're going to wrap it up. So cities across this country are becoming less family friendly as housing density increases. With an increase in density, should we expect Coeur d'Alene to become less family friendly? So this project, with the core housing, it's really not trying to create additional density. It's just yes, there will be a few additional housing units that will be fit into some of the neighborhoods, but it's not a massive increase in the number of units. So we don't see it as high density housing product types at all. It's really is compatible with the residential areas. And we see a lot of these housing product types would be family friendly. It's going to allow some of these families to have a place to raise their families. And maybe if they choose to not be an apartment, they could actually be in a little cottage, or they could be in a live work unit, or they could be in one of these multiplexes. So I think that this is really a good answer for maintaining our family friendly community that we already have as we move forward. And we're doing a lot through our comprehensive plan as well to make sure that we maintain our character as we grow. All right. And we have one more comment, and then we're going to terminate the comments and wrap it up. So this one, let's see. Core housing creates a better column of housing to expand the movement of people as additional differing product is available. So more of a comment, and that's from one of our committee members. So thank you for that, Rob. Okay, I think we're good. Any panelists want to make any final remarks before we close the evening?
I would just like to thank all of the people that participated and for the questions that came forward. It helps us do a better job of refining, this endeavor. I wanted to say that, good ideas don't have boundaries. So whether they come from Washington, Oregon, California, part of our responsibility is to look for the good solutions and then adapt them to Coeur d'Alene. So I think that we'll continue to throw a wide net and make sure that we get the best that we can.
Thank you, Kevin. We really do appreciate everyone being here and participating tonight. This was wonderful input and feedback for us as we work on the code. Based on some of the responses, it looks like we maybe won't be able to bring the code forward to council as quickly as we thought, because we'll want to make sure we reach out to the neighborhood groups, but we'll still keep pushing on this because it's very important for our community. We'll make sure to post this video on our website. We'll have a link from our core housing page. So we'll share that on the Facebook event and post so that information is available, and we'll be working with our community groups and our committee as we move forward. Anything, Mike, that you'd like to say to wrap it up?
I would just like to thank everyone that showed up today and participated and gave us input. I really appreciate that, and thank our panelists. And just it was a good meeting. So thanks.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to our council members that are on, our commission members and committee members, and everyone who's here. Thank you. Have a great evening.